Okay, sir, I'll be recording the interview so I can transcribe it later. Is that
Of
okay?
course. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
So I heard you were going out of the country. That's why we had this meeting today.
I'm leaving on Thursday for about 10 days. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
looking forward to the break, quite frankly.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just get started with the interview.
All
So,
right. Let's do it.
so this is for the Liver Transplant Society of India newsletter. We have like four publications in the year, so once every 3 months. And
Okay.
this interview is for up close and personal. So it's not about transplant surgery. It's not about surgery at all, actually. We want to get up close and personal with you and talk about your life and your experiences. And
Do it.
the idea is just to showcase and to put this out there for all the surgeons in India to show that how some of the achievers in the field, how they've really done for themselves outside of surgery.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, sir, thank you first of all for agreeing for the interview.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay. So then, first question. So, how did you choose transplant surgery as a career? And was there any particular person who inspired you uh, to uh, to take on this challenging yet magnificent field at a time when transplant surgery people had very little idea about?
Yeah. This is always a good question. Why does somebody stumble on a career and stay with it? And for me, it's interesting. I was going to be a plastic surgeon. This was my interest, and I had a fellowship lined up already to go to San Francisco to do plastic surgery. And then I was exposed to liver disease when I was a junior resident at the University of Michigan, and there was a lot of portal hypertension. People with Sink stock and Blakemore tubes, people in Trendelenburg from massive bleeding. And I felt like this was an area that was very fascinating, but not well understood and not well treated, and there had to be something better. And this was 1986. So liver transplant was beginning, but it was not out there yet. So I started reading a little bit, and of course, Tom Sarzel's name came up and Sir Roy Khan, but it felt like the dark ages a little bit.
Mhm.
And I suddenly got attracted to the idea that number one, I thought there was more relevance and impact on life. And I started changing from being the plastic surgeon I want to be, who's technically oriented, to maybe the transplant surgeon who's technically oriented, but also into an expanding area that it has a lot of intellect, which I wanted to engage with. And fascination with liver disease and so much to be done, it was not done. It was just in evolution. There is some excitement about it in that phase where something is happening and is not fully unfolded yet, and you want to be part of that. Now, I was exposed to liver disease a lot at the University of Michigan. That was kind of the first hit, maybe.
Mhm.
And then you say, well, who inspired you? Well, I came to Henry Ford as a resident, and the liver transplant service, they had done 2 livers the whole time. So I was never exposed to it really at Henry Ford as a liver transplanter, but they did a good number of kidney transplants. And one time in the middle of the night, the transplant surgeon, when I was a senior, and then I was helping with the recovery, and he goes, what are you going to do? I said, plastic surgeon. He goes, I said, what? It's not surprised people do that to me, but he said, you look to me and you act like more like a transplant surgeon. I don't, can you describe that person to me? He goes, well, you're very excited to go out at 2 a.m. and bring liver and kidneys with me. And you're technically, very fortunate. But then for me, Hirak, to affirm that, I asked the residency here to let me go away for 2 months. And I wanted to go somewhere out of state. So I went to Beth Israel Deaconess in Boston. the late Dr. Monaco was the program director, and he was a very delightful person, very paternalistic, but in a kind way, did amazing physical exams, amazing science, rounded in teams, would sit in big room, was 28 people in the room. And that teamwork was very inspiring there. And I got with him to clinic, and then Dr. Roger Jenkins was doing liver transplant. And all I can remember Roger's thinking is like Clint Eastwood doing liver transplants. There was some sexiness to the whole thing that Roger imparted, and he was technically superb. He was trained by Tom Starzl, one of his disciples. And I said, dang, that excitement and that science and the technique and the relevance to making a difference in the life of others, it was a package. Little did I know, it was going to be so much hard work. There was no full disclosure on the amount of hard work required to become that surgeon. But yeah, that's the long-winded answer of how I got to be there.
That's amazing. That's amazing to hear your story there, right there. So, moving out from transplant surgery, tell us a little about yourself, your early days in Beirut, before you went to medical school, or and then what are the things you miss about home as well?
Yeah, I tell you, the story of immigrants is always unique, right?
Right.
Because when you're an immigrant and you come to a different country, all what people see is you're different. And they don't see the similarities, they see mostly the differences. And so I grew up one of 7 in Lebanon, and of course, we're Arabs, but we're also French educated. This is very common in Lebanon. You're bilingual from day one. And my father was in the army, and he was the general when he retired. So we lived a very organized life, short haircuts, black shoes. You wake up at time, you go to bed on time, that kind of thing. And we went to Catholic schools, so it was very regulated that way. Lebanon was very idyllic place, very idyllic, beautiful. People don't know, but we're on the water, and then there's mountains right there. Nature, you have all the weather patterns from snow to summer. We truly have the seasons there. It was very idyllic, very beautiful until 1975. And when I was 15, and the Civil War broke out, we were homeless for about a year and a half. We ran away under the bomb shelves. Our house was destroyed. And so we went to Syria. We escaped. Our car got shot. And then there was a coup d'etat where the army, was flopped over. And my dad was basically the other. So he was forced into retirement. And so it was not very pretty after that. It was survival. It became a survival. Now, when I was younger than that, my dad was always traveling. So we lived in Egypt for 4 years. We lived in France for 2 years. We traveled transiently to other countries. So my older brothers didn't make a lot of friends because of that. I made friends because I made them during the war. And so we were an army family, multilingual, multicultural. We saw the world, and we know that we're all the same. We just have different accents and different colors, But I always longed to Lebanon because I always say, wherever you grow up and wherever you struggle, whether it was good or bad, a piece of you remains there. Your body's here and part of your heart is over there.
Yeah.
And that's for every immigrant, the same story. We sacrifice a lot to be somewhere else, and let's make it worthwhile,
It's so beautiful to hear. I'm so sorry about the tragic past, but I'm so glad that you're here now.
Yeah. I
And
tell
how
you,
did you get
Hirak,
into?
I never feel terrible about it. I just feel like it made us stronger. The people emerge as more resilient when they realize the good things they have in life and how challenges make them stronger, not weaker. The only challenge that we all have, you in India, like if you were living in the United States, it's very far to go see your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And we all in our culture value our parents so much. We want to be there for them.
True,
And
true,
so
absolutely.
that's why most of my vacation time was back to Lebanon to make sure I take care of my parents. So that's an important piece.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So how did you get into medical school from here?
Well, I went to medical school at the American University of Beirut.
Mm.
I switched from French to English. You
Okay.
know, it's funny thing is the medical school there for me would have been St. Joseph University, which is the French system. But then when I thought for residencies where people went, I did not think it was a good model. I thought the American model was better. But most of my friends went to Germany. Some of them were German. So I studied German at the Goethe Institute for 2 years before I studied English. And then when I realized that they are very professorial and hierarchical, I said, I guess I'm back to the American system. I wasted 2 years learning German. So although I still command some German, but then I switched to learning English actually. So when I entered the university, I could read it and answer an exam, but I could not speak it. So I would always have Webster's next to the medical books and translating words and things.
But
So then,
you
yes, I went
speak
to American University of Beirut. So I came to the United States as a foreign graduate.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
You
yeah.
speak Arabic, right?
Yeah, of course. That's my mother tongue.
So we wanted to know, like, how is the Arabic different from, like Lebanon, Egypt, and USA that you speak?
Yeah.
Is there any
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah, I think that the Arabic we all speak in the region is dialects,
Right.
different dialects. Like even in Lebanon, there is like 5 dialects or more, depending. And Lebanon is this big, there is so many dialects, and we make fun of each other. That's the best part. And the Syrians have an amazingly different dialect, Syrian, and among them is different. And Lebanon and Syria were always mixed. So many of my cousins and aunts and my grandmother, they're Syrian. So my grandmother and her family were Syrian, and so she kept her Syrian accent, and that was the joke in the family. So whenever somebody wanted to tease her, they would imitate her Syrian accent when we had all Beiruti accents, and the Beiruti accent is like from southern Alabama. Very heavy, but the Egyptians are more like the Bostonians,
Right.
but we all understand each other, but there are certain things that we may miss. And but that's the beauty of that diversity in that part of the world is that people have dialects, people have habits, and we exchange them, we intermarry, we live with them. It's just a beautiful thing. It's just a beautiful thing, that diversity.
So next, we would like to know about your family now. Tell us a
Sure.
little bit about your family
Yeah.
and how you met your wife. Also, we'd like to know that.
Oh, that's getting close and personal.
That's what this is all about.
Well, my wife was terrific. I met her at a very unique stage of career when I was a surgical resident. And if you know surgical residency at the time, we worked 90 to 100 hours a week, which meant like no sleep. I mean, I crashed my car sleeping after being on call, almost got killed.
I
So
know that.
I met her at a time where definitely having a life companion was going to be a nice thing. And I met her through actually a nurse who I worked at Henry Ford. He was a school friend. And the funny thing is, my wife, although originally her mom and dad are Lebanese, she was raised here. And she resisted meeting me. I didn't know that till later, because she wasn't going to meet another Arab guy who may be male chauvinist. So when we got introduced and we had it off, and it's like, I thought she was American, she didn't have any dark skin or anything, because her dad was from Baalbek and they're all light colored there. And then it turns out that she resisted because she thought I was going to be one of those other guys that she grew up with. And I thought, every neighborhood in Lebanon is different from the other, not just every village.
Right.
So that's always been actually quite a fortunate occurrence. We got married 6 months later.
Wow.
And yeah, and we have 3 boys, amazing boys. And each one is as different as the other because we help them sort their own choices in life and careers. So the oldest one wanted to be a dentist at the beginning, then decided on medicine. He tested the waters. And then when I asked him what specialty in medicine you want to do, he goes, not transplant. I told him,
Why
you
is
cannot You cannot choose by
Very
default.
wise.
You have to choose with what you actually want to do. So he's now into orthopedic surgery fellowship residency at Washington University in St. Louis. The middle one is outdoorsman. He's a skier, hiker, and goes to school to study industrial design. And his future is to build skis and bindings. So,
Wow.
I taught him skiing when he was young, and I didn't realize I was sending him away from home on a one-way ticket. So he actually is a ski instructor as well, and he loves the outdoors, and he lives to be outside, basically. The funny thing is, when he was young, he would not get in the house till 10 o'clock when he was 12. And every time it snowed outside, he would get dressed and go outside and come back all wet from the snow. His face is all red, his nose is runny. And then he tells me, wasn't this great? And we're thinking he's going to get a pneumonia. So then he is now living in Utah out west, realizing what I think is a dream of his. And the youngest one, Bashar, lives in New York. He goes to school there at Parsons School of Design. He's a fashion designer. So if you want to see how people realize their career, his school and advisor told him he needs to be an engineer, minerals engineer. And I said, interesting. I said, why? So this is as far from you and what I see in you as an identity as ever. I said, you draw, you like colors, you're always putting things together, model car, model dress. So when you spend like a week or two putting down on a piece of paper what you love today and what you see, what you experience, and what you didn't care for. And then one time he comes down to the kitchen dressed like he's going to a party at 7 a.m. I says, Basar, what's going on? He says, I made a decision of where I want to take my future life. Look, he's 16, right? So I am just wondering what did happen to this boy. He says, I want to be a fashion designer. So we sent him for a summer program for 2 weeks to just make sure this is a big change. So he went for 2 weeks. The kid would call us at 1 a.m. to see if we're awake. Of course, we're not. To share the clothing design with us, how excited he was.
Amazing.
And that's what he is now. He's just living the dream in New York. And so these are the three boys, the Abouljoud boys, each one in a very different discipline.
Really, really nice.
None of them transplant.
None of them transplant. That's
I'll
very
tell you,
nice.
my oldest son, though, to be true, I used to bring him into Iran with me. They were all fascinated with the life-saving activity we did and the impact on the life of others. But I'm an older generation. We didn't have work hours. And frankly, I'm an international graduate. When I came here, it's like I was getting loaded. I think it's above the average that existed. So they saw me work to try to settle down and build an enterprise, and failure was not an option for me. I was a foreign guy looking to become a citizen and getting the job settled. So they all saw a version of work that imparted work ethic on them, but they thought that maybe too much, more than they would want to do. And so they are fascinated by my work, but they don't dare try it. Yeah.
So actually, that was going to be my next question. How do you manage now to maintain a work-life balance? And how do you manage to maintain it within your, not just you, but within your department work environment?
That's a good question, Hirak. I think that the system as it is designed, whether it is healthcare in the United States or elsewhere, particularly in the US, because that's where I live now, and training paradigms and residencies and fellowships are not built by default to care for people. They're built to run a business at any cost. So unless we are intentional in the microcosm of your residency and your practice, unless you are intentional on watching for this and managing with this, you will fail in the well-being dimension for yourself and for others. And it's not easy because there is inertia that works against you. Work needs to be done, and nobody tells you, oh, you're shorthanded. Of course, we'll hire 2 more people. Nobody does that. Nobody does it, because there is always going to be cost and overhead. And the system is very tight, meaning that people want to pay you less for the same work you do. And there's more work to be done because it's added up. Electronic medical records, more documentation, more regulations, organ donation happening at 2 a.m. because your organ bank says it wants to go now, otherwise the organ is not yours anymore. So you try to set up systems, but the system design really works against you. So that's why I preface that by saying we all have to be committed to saying we need to redesign various systems of healthcare delivery. And if we're not committed, it will not change. So I don't want my chairman to say, we have a session on well-being, and then when we go back to our office, the same thing is still happening. They tell you have to come at 2 a.m. after you work 36 hours. Oh, sorry, but we have to do it. But yeah, come to the well-being lecture. Well, what's the lecture about if it's not to redesign the system? So I think that's the preface to all that conversation. Now, when I was early career and fellow, I'll be honest, as a resident, the rules were set by somebody else. As a fellow, the rules were set by somebody else. And they never knew how much I worked. I crashed my car 2 times. I was tired numb. There is an expression called tired numb, where you're so tired, you're shaking and you're numb. I reached that level many, many, many times. And it's wrong to do that. I would leave home on Thursday and come back on Tuesday. So I had to lay down, not sleep, lay down to get enough energy to go. And I'm sure you've had that. So that was my early years. So I cannot talk about work-life balance, except that when I got married, I made it a point that every week there's going to be one night where we're going to go out to dinner, me and my wife, watch a movie. And that was such a special treat. Of course, when we were fellows, it was a dollar movie theater, but and we brought our own pop and candy. So we couldn't afford it because all my extra money was going to the attorney to work on my visa. So, but when I was a faculty, though, I tried to create free time for the children and home. And that was protected time in a way that I would not sacrifice. So the kids were young, it's snowing outside, we're going to play in the snow. They're going to go ski, we're going to build a snowman. Or when they were young, I would take them putt-putt. They became good golfers later in years. And so I always built an activity that's devoted for them. A couple of them went to bowling league. They became very good at bowling. It's good for the winter in Michigan indoors. So we did the bowling league. But if you ask me, was that enough? I don't think you ever can ask a dad and say, did you spend enough time with your children when you work 80 hours every week? My engineering friends think that I'm crazy when I think 80 hours is a good thing. All Americans think 40 hours is a work week. What are you doctors talking about 80 hours in a week? So, my dad was in the army, so he was not there. So to me, I was used to the idea that you're working, you're raising the family, you're providing for them, and you're not there. But the American dad is different. The American dad is a soccer coach, baseball coach, does all these things on the weekend and the evenings, cleans the dishes. And stuff. When I got home to go to read to the children, I was falling asleep. Yeah. So I think that work-life balance has to really work with your career, and your career needs to have work-life integration with your personal life. But there needs to be some boundaries where you say, I will not cross that. Because you will always creep into your life. And that's why when my younger faculty here, when I became chief, they work less hours than I did, but during those hours that they're working, they may have worked harder than I do. But if they're not on call, I don't want to call them in. I don't want to call them in. If we have 3 livers and we cannot handle them, I do not want to call somebody who's not in. Why? Because if they don't come in, they feel guilty. And if they sacrifice something in, they ruin their life. So that's why there is a call schedule. There is a call schedule. You honor the schedule. If they're off on the weekend, don't even send them an email. You have to compartmentalize your personal time. And so system design, work-life integration, making your life a priority in the life of your family. When you are 65 and 75, these are the ones who are going to recognize you for your parenting. not the hospital recognizing you for your work. That
Right.
is meaningless if your family doesn't recognize you. It's
Very
very lonely.
true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of question about your tenure as ASTS president.
Oh
So,
my God.
just how was life as ASTS president, and
Yeah.
what did you enjoy the most, and what was most fulfilling to you during that period?
Yeah. Thank you, Hirak. This is a tough question because when I became president, COVID broke out.
Mhm.
So I became the virtual crisis management president. So when people say I'm the president and you go and there is 2,000 people, 5,000 people, and you're speaking and they applaud, no, we were on Zoom. We were on Zoom. And people were very scared. People, and there was a major racial divide in the United States with many Black people getting either traumatized by police or assaulted by police unjustifiably, or even lay people getting ambushed by lay people because they're guarding the community and killing a Black, kid just because they're Black when they're actually going to school and they live in the community. And that trickled into the society and how the society handles diversity and how do we acknowledge that we have work to do to advance our diversity agenda. Now, you and I know that a lot of us international people in the society, and we know why, right? It's fascinating specialty, but also our work ethic comes from the background that nothing will get in my way.
True.
Okay, I will give it all I have. Well, others may have choices, but to me, it's not just about choices, but it's also about work ethic and cultural differences. So that all was falling on the presidency. People were angry, scared, frustrated, and we were in a state of transition with the CEO, and we changed CEO at the time. So leadership needed to be very strong, very engaged, very resilient, and also in touch with the people. So it was a very difficult, challenging presidency because it did not have the typical secondary gains you get from an activity. The sugar on top, or they call it, or frosting on top, whatever, cream on top. So to me, I had to reframe my mind and say, there is a war out there, get up and go, help people run an organization, inspire people to stand tall. We're going to recover from all this and collaborate with our AST colleagues and the ILTS colleagues and the ASPBA as it comes to the COVID therapies that are evolving, the transplant protocols that are evolving, and how to really help hospitals develop routines for isolation and how to be able to transplant people. How do you vet the donors with COVID? And when the recipients get COVID, how do you deal with that? So all that was in the background being facilitated. So if I say the 4 or 5 things that came to my mind was we needed a strong administrative leadership, and I'm very proud of the fact that we have a crew change, leadership change in the CEO under my term. I led the recruitment, and Maggie Kepler was my recruit at the time. We put in a diversity platform. So we created bylaw changes. We created a Boldly Against Racism task force at the time. And then we changed the bylaws to have a chief diversity officer that will become president after 3 years of service. They become vice president, and they get elected in open election with experiential diversity background. Experiential meaning it's not one particular background or ethnicity or race, it's just that package. We consolidated the Transplant Accreditation Council, and we just issued our first certificate, actually 2 oral exam sessions. It's not a board yet. I cannot call it a board because it's not a requirement, but we're encouraging people, but it will become down the line, probably in a few years. And we piggyback into that the people who are already in practice. We created an international committee to bolster relationships, with the people in transplantation everywhere, so that the offshoots of ASTS can facilitate with other societies. and created the Organ Recovery Collaborative Network, where, again, organ offer from Kansas. I know a transplant surgeon in Kansas with a quality standard. There's a registry. So that's in development. The backbone is started. So there was a lot of things happening. And I feel very proud to have been part of that, because that's it, to me, it go in my life history that I made a difference. And I was able to be part of that change. My spouse was very supportive. My family was very supportive. My partners took me off call schedule. They were behind me 100%. My assistant in my office, Sue basically told me half of your time is ASTS. That's what it took. 50% of my time was ASTS time. And that, I think all of us in our phase of careers have to give back. Transplant was a great career for me. And that was my way to give back to our community. And I feel very proud of that. But I would not do it again. One term is plenty. I cannot do another term.
Well, it's great to hear. I mean, not just for the achievements, but for the amount of work. I mean, we all try to put in for our respective countries and, respective fields. And one of the big achievements I thought was the PAC task force in giving accreditation and possibly even board certification for the foreign graduates, because that's a big problem for all the foreign graduates studying transplant surgery, and especially with the insurance requiring the board certification. It's a big problem for them to get proper jobs with good salaries, because I've seen many people get salaries, but they're not good enough because they have to go into some sort of compromise regarding this.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. These were actually some of the driving forces, Hirak, because the TAC has been in the process for over 10 years. I believe Alan Langness, and I was at that time in the fellowship committee, and we talked about this. Alan Langness was there, Charlie Miller, and then subsequently other presidents. We carried the baton. This is one of the longest projects in the history of ASTS, besides creating fellowships, that was passed from one president to the other. And I'm not sure if you know, but the TAC, I was asked by Dr. Charlie Miller, when he was president, to head the first formation of the TAC. At that time, it was an idea, it was a business, and they asked me if I could lead it and build the committee, the council, the committees, the exams, and the pathways. And I took that on for 3 years before I went for the president-elect role. And at that time, I was serving on the American Board of Surgery. And I was on the diplomats committee and the exam committee. So that gave me informed approach to what the American Board of Surgery did. Now we can adapt that to our transplant framework.
Very nice. So since we don't want to make it a very long interview, because we also have to put all this in print. So a couple more questions only.
Yeah.
One is, what do you do in your free time when you're not thinking about transplant or not doing surgery? What do you like to do?
Yeah, I'm a very busy guy.
Yeah, we know that.
I'm a very busy guy. So before even medicine, I was always super busy. So I resumed most of my hobbies, interestingly, that I had back then. And so I used to hunt birds. Now I go hunt pheasants, and I shoot clay. I like to do that a lot. And I took my children; they love it, shooting clays. And I like fishing a lot, and so I go fishing. I realize in Michigan it's different kind of fishing from what I grew up with in Lebanon, the Middle East. But I do, trout and fly fishing and walleye. And actually, I bring the walleye home. We eat it. Okay. And I bring the pheasant home and we eat it. So I don't fish. Oh. I don't kill anything I'm not going to eat. So I do those, and I like riding motorcycles. I grew up doing that, and I heard the Royal Enfield, which is based in India now,
right,
just came up with the Super Meteor 650, which is going to be a classic cruiser. And congratulations, Royal Enfield in India. But I ride a Kawasaki. So, and I'm going actually later this week. mentioning I was traveling is because we're going riding in Spain with a group of people, a BMW club. And so these are some of my passions. And my wife and I like to go eating and traveling a lot. We do a lot of that. So we like to go as far as we can and eat all the diverse foods we can. So we're food lovers and travel lovers. So we do a lot of that as well.
So have you, you've been to India a few times, right?
No,
You've
actually,
never
it's
been to India?
no, because every time I tried to do that, the roles that I had at Henry Ford got in the way for it. And then one time, I remember I was invited to go, and my middle son got ill, and got very ill. So we had to go get him from school, and my wife and I, and so that committed us for 2 months for no mobility. So actually, I wound up having to pass on every opportunity, believe it or not.
Well, in that case, I don't know when, but we're going to invite you to India very soon.
I'll be
There are
delighted.
definitely lots of programs coming up. There's probably, we're planning to bid on ILTS also in the next 1 or 2 years. And even outside of that, I'm sure we'll work something out. We would love
Yeah.
to have you in India.
Hirak,
You have to
I'll
come
come
with
in
your
quick.
family.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. You know, the
last
thing
question.
is, yeah,
Yes,
we make our schedules a little bit ahead of time than most people. And
right.
that's part of the limitations, is that it's hard sometimes to break. But now that Dr. Yoshida is division chief, I'm relieved from a lot of that. So that's good.
True, true. So last question. So if not a transplant surgeon, actually, if not a surgeon, what would you be? What would you have been?
Well, it's interesting you say that. First, I've never imagined myself not being a transplant surgeon, just because I drank the Kool-Aid. I drank the Kool-Aid. This is like once you tell somebody, hit your head against the wall, does it hurt? Yes. Hit it again. Well, now it feels good. It's like, what? So, but when I was in Lebanon, I was very fascinated with the Middle East surgery. I am so fascinated with hearing loss, Middle East surgery, Middle Ear implants. It is a science like no other. So if I stayed in Lebanon, I would be a Middle Ear expert if I didn't leave Lebanon. Now, if I did not go into medicine, I love strategy. Actually I applied to Harvard Business School when the war broke out. I said, I'm quitting medicine. I am broke. I have no money, and I said, I can't afford it. I'm just going to go to the US and put an application to Harvard. What came on my mind, I have no idea. But I put an application there, then I ignored it. But I would be in business, and my focus and interest has always been strategy and system design. That's why I'm always thinking that way.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you discuss all these things with us and
Thank
share
you.
all your thoughts. And my wife would love to say hi to you.
Please. Yeah, I miss her.
Hey, Marwan, how are you?
Hello, how are you? My God, you're still keeping the same smile. I just want to know how you do it.
Have you noticed how much weight I've lost?
Well, men, when they are smart,